I'm gonna be talking to you guys about the 3 key items I'm looking for in my best public land archery setup. And the first one is just to the south of me here. I'm walking towards it, and that is a doe group. All right, the first thing that I want to find when I'm looking for that perfect spot to sit during the peak of the rut, bow in hand, is I need to know where a doe zone is at, as I like to call them. That could be a crop field, it could be just a hay field, a food plot on private land, it could be a clear cut on public land. Any one of these things, maybe it's a bait pile in states where that's legal, where you know there's a bait pile. Any of these things can increase those doe numbers into a sort of an artificially inflated density, higher density. And in my case, where I'm headed right now is a beautiful hay field. They've actually got alfalfa planted. They planted it a couple years ago, so it's just luscious, bright green, beautiful, beautiful alfalfa. Right now, I'm on a big chunk of public land. I got my my pruning pole in tow. I got a bunch of gear with me, a little bit of camera gear, and then a backpack with some cameras and folding saws, stuff like that. But this is the first thing I'm looking for, is that doe zone, that higher concentration of deer that I know is going to be that way throughout the whole fall. A food source that's going to last the whole rut, because on these big public land chunks, oftentimes the food is pretty low quality, it's kind of scattered and random, and there's just no real defining or concentrating features of the landscape. So that's why I oftentimes find myself looking first for those hay fields, crop fields, food plots on private land, things like that, that I know has increased the doe numbers in that area. And again, this is a rut spot that I'm gearing this towards. We're actually heading into one of my favorite rut stands that I have. Really good pictures last year of the bucks, and you know, they're just satelliting and orbiting those doe zones is all they're doing during the rut, as you guys know. So that's the first thing I'm looking for, find that doe zone. Alright, now the second thing I'm looking for, after I've found that nice doe zone, that high concentration of does, next thing I'm looking for is this. Right behind me here you can see the swamp grass. I'm looking for some feature, terrain feature, that will bar other or most hunters from trying to get back into the area. And this particular piece of public that I'm on there's private over that way, private back behind me, behind the camera this way, and the only way to get back to the southern part of this public land is through this swamp. And see, it's actually a little bit drier this year, but even still I need hip boots to get through here. And I'm wearing them right now, so I take my leather boots and I just tie the shoelaces together and throw them over my shoulder, and then I wear the hip boots across the swamp, and from there, once I get to the other side, I'll just take the hip boots off, roll them up, leave them on shore, and then throw my leather boots back on. And that's what I'll do even during the bow hunting season and during the rut, is just that same effort there. So today I'm just going back in to do some last minute pruning. I'm going to put a couple trail cameras up, and I'm not hunting today, but I will be hunting this in about a month and a half. Come late October, around Halloween, or that first week in November, you can bet that I'll be back in here. So that second thing that I'm looking for is really that terrain feature. Now in my case, it's a wet swamp here. In a lot of cases it might be a body of water. Maybe you need to take a little canoe or a small boat, like a 12-foot aluminum boat or something, across a body of water. You can get a set of oars, row across it, things like that. Hip boots, any swamp that requires hip boots. You know, maybe it's a river or a creek that's deep that you need, again, a little watercraft to get across, a little camel kayak or something. There's any number of features. Water tends to be that one that I use most often that deters other hunters from going back in here. Now, you're not gonna get everybody to stop, but if I can eliminate 80 to 90+% of the other bow hunters around me, that's a big deal to me. And so that's something that I want to do and that I have to do in my spots, because the part of Minnesota where I'm hunting, there are a ton of other public land hunters, and I just can't hunt next to other people. And not that not that the other hunters are bad hunters or not good guys. You know, we're all after the same thing in the end, but I just can't sit there and keep my confidence level up on stand if I know that someone else is walking around where the deer is supposed to be coming from, if they're scenting up my area, things like that. You guys get it. It's just not a style of hunting that I can do. So this is that second thing that I'm looking for on my public land bow hunting spots, is that barrier to other hunters. Some feature, terrain feature. The other one that you can use to your advantage that will exclude a lot of other hunters is distance, and that's just distance in on public land. It seems like most hunters are not willing to walk more than a half mile through the woods or thick cover, and if you can find a way to do that, if you can get back to 3/4 of a mile plus, it seems as though you've eliminated just about everybody. Not every single hunter, but most of them you've now eliminated. And so that's another thing to think about. The two most common, I would say, that I've used for sure is number one, water as a barrier, and number two is distance. Now the third thing that I'm looking for is where the first two items I talked about, that doe zone and that barrier to other hunters, intersect with one another. So I always think of it like a Venn diagram. You can have spots that are hard to get at, public land chunks that are hard to access, and that's one thing. And then over here you have public land chunks that are adjacent to a high quality food source. That's another thing over here. It's where those two circles overlap, and that Venn diagram shows the overlap between those two things. That's the third item I'm looking for, is the intersection of these two concepts. And I've got a few spots that I bow hunt on public land, and on all of them I'm taking advantage of both of those features, and they're not easy to find, and you got to do a lot of searching, but they are out there and they do exist. And so those are three things that in my mind, when I'm looking for a public land archery spot, that I gotta have. And once I find this kind of spot, typically it's tore up with sign, it's got buck sign in it, not always, but most of the time. And I'm either gonna find an existing perennial scrape, or if there's not one there where I wanna hunt it and wanna place my deer stand, then I'm gonna create my own mock scrape. And that's what we got up ahead here, this stand I'm going into. I'm gonna show you guys. I'm taking advantage of those, well, all three concepts really. I'm getting in up against the backside of a luscious alfalfa field where there's does out in there all summer feeding in the evenings. There's bucks out there in velvet, and I'm coming up on the back side of it through the cover. But the nice part of this is that there's good bedding cover off to the sides on both sides of me, and I'm coming through this wet swamp where they're not actually bedding here. So it's a really sneaky access. Every year I go back in here, it's new. I may find that another hunter moved in here. I may find that I'm not the only person back here. As of now, as of last year, I was the only person back in here with any deer stands. So I'm back in now. I'm gonna go check it out, make sure no other hunters have come back here and moved in. And I'm gonna go make sure that I get my mock scrape set up in a place that is gonna work for about a 20-yard bow shot from my deer stand. All right, you guys, if you have gotten any value out of the video at this point, I have one small favor to ask. Please hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to my channel. If you enjoy content like this, that really helps me out. Now, the rest of my video did get cut short because I got rained on. It started to downpour right as I was heading back to my deer stand, so I wasn't able to pull the camera gear out and show you guys my mock scrape or my actual stand setup, but I will do that in a subsequent video. Well, as soon as I shut the camera off, it started to downpour, so I got pretty soaked. I had to put the camera gear away. I will go wrap up this episode at the house here. The main concept here, the main takeaway, is that I'm looking for those three key defining features. First, I'm looking for that doe zone, and then secondly, I'm looking for areas that are difficult to access as a hunter, and then thirdly, I'm looking and pairing up those spots where that Venn diagram, those two concepts intersect, where you have a difficult place to access with that doe zone, that food source that'll last the whole fall. Those are the three concepts behind my archery hunting, those public land strategies that I'm using
when I'm going out bow hunting, and this applies to gun hunting or really any situation. So we have a lot of seasons opening up across the country right now. I hope you guys are getting after it and not losing sight of the big picture. I love shooting a big buck as much as anyone, but most importantly, we're after that experience, that fulfillment as hunters, a time to pursue friendships with friends, family, camaraderie. That part of it is so important. I hope you guys find fulfillment this fall above all else. Don't get caught up on an antler score, although it is fun and I love shooting big bucks. Don't lose sight of the big picture, and I hope you find that fulfillment this fall.